In a famous village Udi in Enugu State, the Egwu masquerade festival was the highlight of the year. Every man in the village was expected to take part, wearing intricately designed masks and costumes that symbolized the spirits of their ancestors. It was an event that brought together the community, where the men danced and performed sacred rituals that honored the gods. Women, however, were strictly forbidden from attending, as tradition held that the festival was a male-only domain. But for Nkem, a spirited young girl, known for her curiosity, the festival was an enigma she couldn't ignore. Her brothers and father always spoke of the greatness and mystery of Egwu, and Nkem longed to witness it for herself. The secrecy surrounding the event fueled her desire, and as the festival drew near, she hatched a daring plan. Disguised as a boy, with her hair hidden and a loose cloth draped over her frame, Nkem snuck into the festival grounds, determined to see the sacred rituals firsthand. Nkem spent hours planning the perfect disguise. She borrowed her older brother's clothes and practiced mimicking his walk. She knew that if she was caught, the consequences would be severe. As she approached the masquerade grounds, her heart pounded with excitement. She passed unnoticed by the villagers, who were all focused on the festivities. The air was thick with anticipation, as the sound of drums echoed through the night. Nkem felt a thrill of exhilaration as she entered the circle of dancers, watching the men in their elaborate masks and regalia perform rituals she had only heard of in whispers. For a moment, she felt like part of something sacred and powerful, a force much larger than herself. But as she moved closer to the central altar, her foot accidentally kicked a sacred offering, disrupting the carefully arranged ritual. Immediately, the atmosphere shifted. The music stopped, and the men fell silent. The chief priest, his face shadowed beneath his mask, turned toward Nkem, his gaze icy and piercing. The gods had been disturbed. The elders, who had been observing the ceremony from a distance, murmured in shock. Nkem's heart dropped as the chief priest stepped forward, his voice booming with authority. "You have disrespected the gods, young one," he declared. "The balance of our village has been disrupted, and the consequences must be paid." Nkem trembled as the weight of the situation dawned on her. She had crossed a line that was never meant to be crossed. The festival was sacred, and her curiosity had led her to challenge the very foundation of their traditions. The aftermath of Nkem's mistake was swift and unforgiving. Word spread like wildfire throughout Udi, and the villagers, once warm and welcoming, turned their backs on her family. The elders convened in the village square, their voices filled with anger and disappointment. Nkem's parents, who had once been respected members of the community, now stood before the villagers in shame. "You have brought dishonor upon us all," her father's voice cracked. He couldn't meet her eyes as he spoke, the weight of the village's judgment heavy on him. Nkem's heart ached, knowing that her impulsive actions had caused such pain. The once harmonious community now viewed her as a disruptor, a force that had brought imbalance to their sacred traditions. In the days that followed, Nkem was summoned to the chief priest's hut. The air was thick with tension as she stood before the elder, awaiting her fate. The priest, an ancient figure with deep wrinkles etched into his face, stared at her with a mixture of disappointment and authority. He spoke of the importance of the Egwu festival, how it had been passed down through generations and held the village together. "Nkem," the chief priest began, his voice stern, "you have disrupted the harmony of our land. The gods demand a price for your transgression. You must undergo a series of tests to restore balance to this village. Only through your trials will you learn the true weight of our traditions." Nkem's heart sank. She had never imagined that her curiosity would lead her to such an ordeal. The first test set by the chief priest was to venture into the sacred forest, a place that no one dared enter unless they were given permission by the gods. The forest was said to be home to powerful spirits that protected the village, and anyone who entered without reverence would risk angering them. Nkem was to gather a rare herb found deep within the heart of the forest, a task that would require both bravery and humility. As Nkem entered the dense woods, the air grew thick with an eerie stillness. The towering trees loomed overhead, and the distant sounds of wildlife seemed muffled, as if the forest itself was watching her. Every step she took felt heavier, the weight of her actions pressing down on her. She knew that she couldn't fail. If she did, there would be no forgiveness for her family or herself. Deep within the sacred forest, Nkem felt her sense of direction slipping away. The trees grew thicker, the underbrush more tangled, and the faint sounds of animals echoed through the shadows. Nkem had heard stories of the forest's power, but now that she was in the heart of it, she understood its true weight. Every step felt as though she was walking deeper into the realm of the spirit. After what seemed like hours, Nkem finally spotted the herb she had been sent to find, its vibrant green leaves glowing faintly in the moonlight. As she bent down to collect it, she felt a sudden presence behind her. Whirling around, Nkem saw nothing but darkness. Her breath caught in her throat, but she forced herself to remain calm. This was a test, and she would not fail. As Nkem carefully gathered the sacred herb, a soft voice whispered through the trees. "You seek the herb, but have you sought the wisdom of the forest?" The voice was gentle, yet it carried a weight that made Nkem pause. She realized that her actions had always been driven by curiosity, by a desire to understand without fully respecting the forces at play. The forest was not simply a place to gather resources, it was a living entity, filled with ancient wisdom. Nkem closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, and offered a prayer to the spirits of the forest. In that moment, she felt a deep sense of connection to the land and its history. The spirit had accepted her humility, and as she stood, she felt a sense of clarity wash over her. When Nkem returned to the village with the herb in hand, the villagers watched her with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. The sacred forest had tested her, and she had passed. But the journey was far from over. The chief priest observed her quietly, nodding slightly as she placed the herb at his feet. "You have shown humility, Nkem," he said. "But this is only the beginning. The gods are watching, and your journey will continue. There are more trials ahead, and only by completing them will you restore balance to this village." Nkem's heart raced as she realized the weight of what lay before her. Each test would challenge her in ways she had never imagined, but she was determined to face them with the humility and strength she had gained. The second test given to Nkem by the chief priest was a simple, yet difficult one. She was to spend an entire day in complete silence, reflecting on her actions and the consequences of her disobedience. The test was designed to help her understand the importance of listening, not just to the voices of others, but to the world around her. For Nkem, silence was a challenge. Her mind was always buzzing with questions, with the desire to understand everything around her. But as the day wore on, she began to appreciate the stillness. With each passing hour, her thoughts grew clearer, and she realized how often she had acted impulsively, without considering the full weight of her actions. The silence became a mirror, reflecting her past mistakes and the lessons she needed to learn. For the first time, Nkem truly understood the weight of her actions and the sacrifices that others had made for the good of the village. Nkem's trials were not just her own journey, they were watched by the entire village. Word of her efforts had spread, and the villagers, who had once turned their backs on her, now observed her with a mix of awe and respect. As Nkem completed each test, she began to understand that the festival, the masquerade, and the village's traditions were not simply rituals, they were vital to the very fabric of their existence. At the end of the fourth test, Nkem returned to the village square, where the elders awaited her. The atmosphere was heavy with anticipation, and for the first time, Nkem felt truly humbled. The chief priest stepped forward, his voice echoing across the square. "You have completed your trials, Nkem. You have shown humility, courage, and wisdom. The gods are pleased with your efforts, and balance is restored." Nkem could hardly believe what she was hearing. After all she had endured, she was finally being accepted again. With Nkem's trials completed, peace began to return to the village. The once distant villagers now greeted her with kindness, and her family's reputation slowly began to heal. Nkem, however, knew that true healing had come from within. Through her trials, she had learned to respect the traditions of her ancestors, the value of humility, and the importance of understanding the deeper meaning behind the rituals of their community. As the village returned to its rhythms, Nkem took her place once more among the women of Udi. However, she was no longer the curious, impulsive girl who had snuck into the Egwu festival. She had been transformed. With a newfound respect for the traditions and wisdom of the village, she was ready to contribute in meaningful ways, honoring the spirits of the past while also seeking ways to improve the future. Months passed, and the village slowly embraced Nkem as a beacon of change. She shared the lessons she had learned with the younger generation, emphasizing the importance of both honoring tradition and questioning it with respect. Her own journey had taught her that the strength of a community lies in its ability to adapt while maintaining its core values. Nkem's wisdom became invaluable to the village, and as the years passed, she rose to become a respected leader. The people of Udi no longer saw her as a disruptor but as a wise and humble guardian of their traditions. With each passing day, she continued to honor the gods and her ancestors, while also ensuring that the village's practices remained relevant and meaningful for the generations to come. As Nkem grew older, her beauty and wisdom attracted the attention of many suitors. However, she no longer viewed marriage as a mere union for personal gain or social status. She sought a partner who would share her values of humility, respect for tradition, and the willingness to grow together. After years of reflection, she found that partner in Obi, a man whose heart was as pure as hers. Their wedding was a celebration not just of their love but of the village's renewal. It was a union built on respect, trust, and a shared commitment to their community. As Nkem and Obi stood together, surrounded by their families, the villagers rejoiced, knowing that their future was in good hands. Nkem had become not only a woman of great wisdom but also a leader who would guide the village for years to come. As Nkem and Obi settled into married life, they began to raise a family of their own. Nkem instilled in her children the lessons she had learned from her trials, to respect their traditions, to seek knowledge with humility, and to always be open to change when it was needed. Her legacy was not just in the village she helped heal, but in the generations she would inspire. Years later, Nkem became known as the guardian of the festival. It was said that her wisdom had restored balance to Udi, and her story would be passed down through generations as a reminder of the power of humility, respect, and the importance of understanding the deeper meaning of tradition. In honor of Nkem's journey, the village decided to create a new festival that would welcome both men and women to participate. It was a celebration of balance, acknowledging the strength of their traditions while allowing for growth and progress. Nkem's influence had transformed the way the people of Udi viewed their customs. What had once been a festival solely for men was now a unified celebration of their shared heritage, where both genders could honor their ancestors together. The new festival became an annual event, and Nkem watched with pride as the younger generation embraced it. It was a beautiful fusion of tradition and progress, and Nkem knew that it would carry the village into the future, always grounded in the wisdom of the past. As the years passed, Nkem grew older, but her spirit remained as strong as ever. The village of Udi had flourished under her leadership, and it was a place where tradition and progress walked hand in hand. The people now understood that traditions were not rigid rules, but living practices that evolved with time, always in harmony with the gods. Nkem's legacy was carried on through the generations. Her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren continued her work, ensuring that the balance between the old ways and the new remained intact. The village of Udi had not only survived, but it had thrived, all because one young girl had dared to question a tradition and, in doing so, had changed the course of their history. The moral compass of the story revolves around the themes of respect for tradition, humility, and the importance of questioning practices with wisdom. It teaches that 1. Traditions serve a purpose and are deeply rooted in the values of a community. However, respecting these traditions doesn't mean blindly following them. It's important to understand the deeper meaning behind them. 2. Humility is key to personal growth and community harmony. Nkem's journey shows that acknowledging one's mistakes and taking responsibility for them can lead to enlightenment and healing. 3. Wisdom and change can coexist. Nkem's ability to learn from the past and adapt to new circumstances while still honoring her roots highlights that progress does not have to come at the cost of tradition. Ultimately, the story emphasizes the balance between preserving culture and allowing for growth, and that honoring both the old and new can lead to a harmonious and enlightened future.